Well, welcome. So glad to see you again. I'm excited to introduce to you today's guest speaker. Not only is she the niece of Phil Poovey, who is our friend and first cousin, relative, who he lives in South Village. So he introduced me. But I was familiar with Ms. Huffman through my time with Resources for Seniors and on, of seeing her name always in the Resources for Seniors directory as a recommended elder law attorney. So I have made referrals all over a 50-mile square radius of Raleigh and Roxborough to folks for Ms. Huffman for elder law advice and consult. So I think you have a wonderful person who can come and speak today about a topic that is very interesting and relevant and has been something that you all asked for. So it's looking at advanced directives and end-of-life questions from a legal perspective. So some of you who are UNC fans will appreciate that she has her bachelor's from UNC, and then the Southern Baptist, seminary? Theological Seminary for MSW, and also Campbell University for her JD. So she comes well-rounded. I like the fact, as a social worker, to have another social worker, but then have this amazing legal experience and know how to advise all of us in these sometimes complicated, nuanced topics. So I did bring some Springmore swag as a thank you. But thanks so much for taking time to come and speak.
Thank you. I guess I'm shorter. All right. How's this? Can everybody hear me?
I'm sorry, one thing I forgot, because probably we've all forgot at times, is to silence our phone. So we'll give you a moment before you get started.
Okay. I don't care if they ring. We'll just stop for a minute. Thank you for having me today. I love being here. I love speaking to the public. And many of you have submitted questions already that I was able to receive via email. So I'm going to try to address a lot of those. But I want to go through my presentation today and leave time for questions because I know there will be some. That's what I'm going to do. All right. How many people have seen this movie? I care a lot. Oh, my. All right. So I'm not recommending this. Unless you have a really strong heart and you like suspense and you like violence and a lot of sex, don't watch it. But I have people calling my office saying, is this true? Can this happen? Because the premise of this movie is about a public guardian taking advantage of an elderly woman who really wasn't incompetent, and the shenanigans that goes on with that. I love the movie. I watched it for the third time the other day, and I thought, ooh, should I tell people about this? But it really is good. And I say on here, we need to avoid guardianship. And guardianship is really not something anybody who made the decision to move into a CCRC needs to worry about because you've made your planning. The folks who used to be called elder orphans or now are called solo agers. I still don't think that's going to catch on. But those folks who outlive people who can make decisions for them and they end up in the hospital and the doctor says, well, we need somebody to make decisions. You know, the safety net is the government. And in Wake County, at least in North Carolina, the public guardian, the one who takes care of the money, in Wake County at least, can be an attorney. And then the guardian of the person is a social worker at the county DSS. And all of that falls under the jurisdiction of the elected clerks in North Carolina. All of you hopefully have voted for clerks in North Carolina, and every clerk in North Carolina must have a high school diploma. Okay? All right, so we're going to talk about power of attorney. Power of attorney, when somebody says power of attorney, they can be talking about a person or they can be talking about a document. And so I like to think about this as it's a relationship and a document. So this is a quiz for you. So mama takes a sick child to the doctor. Who makes the decisions for the child? Absolutely. Why? Well, and you do it the other way around to say that children are not competent until they're 18. Now, how many people really believe 18-year-olds are competent? Okay, but that's the law, okay? That's the law. You drive your sister to her colonoscopy. You sign a lot of forms before driving her home. Who's responsible for your sister after you leave the hospital? No, she's not. You signed for her. That's what that little tiny language that you signed for said, is that you are assuming she's releasing, they're releasing to you, and you're assuming that. So if you take her to the bank and she takes out $20,000 to give you, and she doesn't remember that, you could be held liable. All right, third, you find yourself in the hospital emergency department. Who makes the medical decisions for you? Trick question. Okay. You do. Who else has a guess? Power of attorney, but the power of attorney is not with you. You're at the ED alone. Doctor? Anybody else? Okay, get them on the phone, right? Okay, so as an attorney, you got to kind of know that I'm going to talk about the law a little bit, right? And so the law in North Carolina is that anyone who's competent, like I say, over the age of 18, which is really questionable about my children, and has the capacity to make decisions, they get to decide. So if you find yourself in the ED and the doctor says, you know what you're talking about, do you know who the president is? Do you know what day of the week it is? You know those questions, right? If you're competent, the doctor has to let you make your decisions. So in theory, nobody needs a power of attorney as long as they can guarantee that they're competent. So don't go get a colonoscopy. Okay? 2, and this is the pecking order. So if there has been a guardian of the person, remember the person is the body, my health care, decisions about where I'm going to live, a social worker can be appointed to be the guardian of my person. In that movie, this woman was guardian of both. And then or a general guardian, which is of my money. So I'm a person and I got money, and if somebody's guardian over both, they're called a general guardian. So if the court has identified a guardian or appointed a guardian for me, I think everybody remembers the Britney Spears thing, right? She had a guardian. The problem with that was that the attorney didn't tell her she'd go back to court and get her guardian, get it removed, right? She could have. All right, then third is a health care agent appointed pursuant to a valid health care power of attorney, right? We can't have just powers of attorney that aren't valid. Well, what do they need to have on them, and what do they need to cover? Well, they're only as good as what they say, right? To the extent of the authority granted. So if you signed a power of attorney and said, I want my agent to make decisions for me unless I find myself in the emergency department, then the power of attorney is no good, right? Okay. And then a financial agent, what we're not going to talk about today, and this is where people, and I find legal language very confusing. So people can talk about a power of attorney and it be a financial power of attorney, and a power of attorney and it being a healthcare power of attorney. So again, one's over your money, one's over your body, not talking about your money today. Then in the fifth position is a patient's spouse. 6, the majority of the parents and children of the person, majority of the siblings, and then an individual who shows up at the ED and they're the next door neighbor and they know the person. They come in, none of those other people are available. The doctor could let that person make a decision. And then if there's nobody else, the attending physician. Okay? So this is the sort of pecking order of decision making that a hospital has to go through of who has the legal right to make a decision. We're going to talk about number 3, the healthcare power of attorney. And remember, that's in the third position. If you have a healthcare power of attorney and your children fight over who you named as the agent, and one says, I want to be the agent, and they go to court to get guardianship, which they can. They might not win, but they have to have you declared incompetent first, and then they have to say, Judge, please, please, pretty please, let me be the guardian over my sibling. So if you got a guardian, the guardian makes the decision, right? But if you have a health care power of attorney that you signed, that health care agent is empowered pursuant to whatever you signed. Now, this is probably the reason I went to law school, because I felt like lawyers made it really hard for us real people, right? They use words that don't make any sense, and then they make it harder than it really needs to be. But to have a valid healthcare power of attorney, you got to jump through some legal hoops. I'm not going to tell you what those legal hoops are, but they're out there. There's also a statutory power of attorney that you can get anywhere off the internet. You can get a better statutory power of attorney off the Secretary of State's website, and it does the job. It names people. That form has a place for 2 agents, so sometimes people mistakenly think they can only name 2 agents because that's what the form has, right? So it gets the job done, but it's really poorly written because guess who wrote it? The people you voted for a long time ago. It was last updated in 2008 by people in the legislature. It's got double negatives in it, which I don't know how to interpret a double negative. But there is an argument by a lot of attorneys who say, well, doctors are used to seeing this. Yeah, we'll just use that. And frankly, it gets the job done, right? But I think there's a lot of other issues that you should think about. That, frankly, a lot of my colleagues on the attorney side who go into estate planning, will drafting, is called transactional work. Many of them do it because they don't want to have conversations with people. So they'll say, I'll do your will and I'll do your powers of attorney, but you go talk to your family about all the important things. Well, in my office, I'm going to probably talk about things that you're going to tear up about because somebody needs to have that hard conversation. And I really think it's wimping out if you tell your clients, just go talk to your family about whether you want burial or cremation or if you want these songs sung. You know, I just think that's not going to happen in most times. I mean, when are people going to do that? At Thanksgiving? It just doesn't happen. Okay, so I have incorporated, and this is a free document. I know you can find it anywhere, but I really kind of like the 5 wishes. It kind of walks you through all of those sort of ancillary important things. I've integrated a lot of those 5 wishes into my healthcare power of attorney, and I talk about other things. Please hear me. I am not saying that you need another power of attorney. In fact, just making the decision to be at Springmore, they have your power of attorney on file. I can promise you. They wouldn't let you in unless you had a power of attorney. But these are just things that I really think that you need to talk about or think about or communicate with your family. If people come in to me and they sign these documents, I email them and I say, share these with everybody you've named, because they don't want paper, and you can communicate this in writing, and I promise you they're probably going to talk to you about it at Thanksgiving. So in mine, with the 5 wishes, some of those ancillary issues that I think are important is name as many people as you can to be agents, because under a healthcare power of attorney, an agent isn't substituting their opinion for what they think you ought to have. They're supposed to make decisions that you would make. If my sons needed to make decisions about what I would make, they would have no idea in the world what I would want because they've never asked and they're not interested. But if I put my girlfriends on there, right, they'll know. So I like to put as many agents, even if they're never going to reach down that way. You know, I may have my spouse and my 2 sons and then my girlfriends on the list. This is a trigger for the people who are actually empowered to make the decisions. Go talk to these people. This is my team, right? These are the people who know what I would do, who've had those conversations with me. And then other issues, if you have a blended family where you have children from different marriages, tough situation. The guardianships that I've been involved in have all been involved with the children stealing the spouse from the other spouse. It's ugly. I hate it, and it happens. Pain relief and medications, I don't know if y'all know this, but you can't, doctors can't use pain meds just to make you, if you're over 65, compliant. Can't drug old people just to make them compliant, right? We've got laws about this. But unfortunately, in my experience, I've seen people who are denied pain medications or other medications for anxiety and stuff that they needed. And people are like, oh, you know, we can't give old people medicine. Well, that's BS. They can. So I address pain relief, medications, also end-of-life care, comfort care. A lot of people don't have a history like I do. We brought our people home to die, even when I was little, and we cared for those that were dying. A lot of people don't have that experience, so they don't know. And so I put some information about comfort care. If somebody has a long-term care insurance policy, by goodness, I want their agent to know it because they paid for it, might as well use it, right? So I put the policy in there. I always ask about what are your wishes. I guarantee you something's going to happen with your body if you die. And I'm not talking about heaven. I'm saying, are you going to be cremated or buried? Somebody's going to make that decision. And if you don't, everybody's going to say, well, what would you want, right? So we talk about that. Put that in there. More and more people are much more comfortable with cremation. I tend to have people who fall in 2 camps. One camp, they want their cremains in one place in perpetuity, and other people are like, just scatter them, right? And people want to know that. They want to be given permission to do something. And I also talk to my clients about how therapeutic that is to let people go. You know, funeral, memorial, celebration of life, mass, raising a beer at the pub. I've written them all. That's a really wonderful thing. I had a client once who wanted Christmas carols sung no matter what time of the year she died. And she died, and the sons called me and said, what do we do? And I'm like, read her health care power of attorney. It's right in there. And I had the opportunity to go to her funeral at her church, which she said. And so the ministerial team ended with singing the first verse of many Christmas carols. And everybody just got up and said, it's just like she planned it herself. And the boys, of course, said, yeah, isn't that amazing? Yeah. All right, for some of my clients, and we're going to talk about this too, is medical aid in dying, and then voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, and I'm going to talk about that. All right, how many people remember Terri Schiavo? Yeah, big deal. Terri Schiavo, back in 1990, I think it was a stroke originally. There's a whatever on it now that you can watch on one of the streaming channels. But the important part is her husband and her family fought in the court system for like 7 years. Back and forth. Do we pull the plug, right? And it all wanted to center on, well, had Terry ever shared her wishes with anyone? And the thing that absolutely pushed it over the edge was the husband said, oh yeah, we had that conversation once. And so they pulled the plug, and the husband got his way. Interesting. Well, every state, this happened in Florida, but after that case started, every state came up with their own laws about advance directives, living will. It's got a lot of names, but it has to do with if a doctor, this is North Carolina's law. Now, every state has a little bit different version, but in North Carolina, if a doctor has determined to a high degree of medical certainty that your body's going to pass because you got a terminal illness and you're not expected to live and they can't keep treating you, right? Because they've said nothing's working. 2, Terri Schiavo. Persistent vegetative state, nothing there. If they took the tubes out of Terri Schiavo, she died. 3, North Carolina later added severe advanced dementia. And I tell my clients that generally means that the brain has forgotten how to tell the mouth how to swallow, so the only way to keep the body going is with tubes, which is artificial. And so remember, the doctor gets to decide what's best for us, right? But this is one area under the law that lawmakers have carved out to say, if you do not want artificial life support in 1, 2, or 3 of those medical conditions, you can put it in writing. Now, theoretically, and I've had a client, if you can make your own decisions, you get to make this decision yourself. But lots of times you can't, and it's an agent doing that. And so I find that it's really important, if this is an important issue to you, to have a living will. Now, my definition of living will has grown over time. The old, terrible, horrible statutory documents talk about food and water, but we all know that food and water isn't the only thing that can keep us alive. And in my opinion, there's nothing artificial about food and water. It's just the way they're administered. So if you don't want artificial life support, you can put that in writing. However, the odds are against you. Because, think about it, if you're in the hospital and the doctor says there's nothing more we can do, what does the doctor have to do? Stop billing insurance, right? Your insurance only pays for you if you're going to get well, right? If you're in the hospital and the doctor says there's nothing more that can be done, well, discharge, right? Because insurance doesn't pay for people just to keep them alive. So one, it's a hard conversation for doctors to have. They avoid it like the plague. One of my clients said, I think the doctor would have continued to give my husband chemo until his ears fell off, right? I mean, the incentive is keep throwing it, right? Keep throwing it at somebody, keep them alive under all costs. So what I tell my clients, what I think is good sage advice is, if you care about this issue for you and your body, have the conversation with your advocates, and then for the advocates to have the conversation with the doctor. If you ask a doctor and you say, look, I want to know the prognosis, I want to know what we're looking at here, they have to tell you. But if you don't say anything, they're not going to talk about it. And so rarely, I went up to Hickory, my godmother, I think she was 100, but she had shaved off 2 years of her life in the family Bible. They had her on life support. When I got there, I was pissed. She didn't need to be on that ventilator. It was awful. But absolutely, 98 or 100 is not too old. All right, the other thing I'll say about this too is I make my documents different. A healthcare power of attorney is everything, making all these decisions. A living will is just a little tiny thing that most people are never in that situation. So I make my documents 2 different documents. All right, how many have seen this? Me Before You. Oh, we got some movie buffs. Okay, so watch this if you need to cry. Yeah, really sad. I didn't see it until like a month ago. And yep, makes me cry. This man breaks his back. He had a very wonderful, full life. He did all kinds of physical things. He was in love with his body, as most young people ought to be. And had an accident, became a quadriplegic. And so he has to decide, what's a meaningful life for me? And what do I get to do with my body? And while he has a mother who is a lot like me, wants to make the decisions because I know best for my children, he's over the age of 18. So he grapples with that. So I'm not going to tell you the end because it would spoil it. But I do want to tell you that in many countries, and about 12 jurisdictions in the United States, we have what people commonly call death with dignity or medical aid in dying. It's known by various things. Now, this opportunity, this law, is only available to people like the man in the movie who have their wits about them. So he had no cognitive impairments whatsoever. So he got to make the decision. If a doctor's ever given you that stupid little test where you had to draw a clock backwards, right? And you failed it, you'll never be able to do this because you have to go through all kinds of testing in another state if you want to take advantage to hasten your death because a doctor has determined that you're going to die because you've got a terminal illness. So it's only for people who have that cognitive ability, right? And some of the states tried to cut people off from traveling to them to do it, and thank goodness, at least in this case, the Supreme Court ruled the right way, that we have a right to go across state lines. And so you can go to other states. And so my clients who feel really strongly about this, I've got a paragraph that means absolutely nothing, but it says, look, agent, if I decide to make this most important decision to travel, if North Carolina doesn't have this law, I want you to support me in this because it's my decision and it's important to me. Okay? Now, here's another one. Who's seen Still Alice? Oh, come on, people. This one's been around for a long time. Julianne Moore did a great job. Julianne Moore had early onset dementia, which is probably the worst thing that a college professor ever wants to have, right? To lose your mental faculties is a really tough thing. And I don't think this spoils it, so I'm going to tell you one of the things that happens in the movie. She's smart. She knows what the diagnosis is. She knows what's happening to her. So she obtains painkillers from her doctor fraudulently. She says she needs them. Well, she didn't need them. She put them in a drawer, and then she left herself a video so that she could see herself on the video to take the pain meds. And there's a very touching scene where she tries to do that. I'm not going to tell you what happens. All right, now, a lot of people are cottoning on to VSED, VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Who's heard of that? Oh, good. Look at that. We've got a good number of people who've heard about this. So I kind of introduced this to my clients by telling the story of Uncle Bob. And he's real. He's not Phillips. So Phillips on my mama's side. Uncle Bob is on my husband's side. Uncle Bob lived into his 90s. He had arthritis, and he lost most of his body fat. So he was in pain a lot. Just getting up and moving was difficult for him. He lived alone into his 90s. His daughter lived just a few houses down. And there was just an understanding, Bob, you always call the shots. He actually is smarter than me. So one day he just said to his daughter, okay, I'm ready to go to the hospital. I really don't like how much pain I'm in, and I'm done. And so Uncle Bob was smart. Did I say that? He knew because he was on Medicare, that if he had 3 nights in the hospital on admission status, that he could go to long-term care and his Medicare would pay the first 12 days. Did y'all know that? Got to have 3 nights on admission status, and then your Medicare can pay for rehab. Okay? So Bob goes to the hospital. He gets his 3 overnights. They bring him hospital food and hospital drinks, and he says, "No, thank you." And so he gets discharged to rehab. He's in the rehab, and they bring him better food, because we all know that rehab's better than hospital food, right? And Uncle Bob says, "No, thank you." And so they called the family in, and we went up to see him. And, of course, you know, he knows my feelings. I'm like, "I totally support you, Uncle Bob. Do you want a beer?" He said, "Yeah." Rehab didn't have a problem at all. He wanted only a few sips, a beer. We would have given him anything that he wanted, right? And the skilled nursing home was really great about it. But he knew that if somebody forced him to eat or drink, what's that law? Anybody know? Huh? No, not the continuous. If somebody forced you to eat or drink, what's the law called that's against that? If I got up and slapped Philip across the face, what would that be? Assault, battery. So battery and assault. If somebody forces you and your body to do something, it's an assault. And he said, "No, thank you." And his mind was fine. So nobody can force you to eat or drink if you say no. Now, there are a lot of... I got to go to the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys conference in Seattle, and there was a breakout session on this. There's other states, obviously, besides North Carolina. I mean, we could talk for weeks about the moral implications for this, and I'm not going to do that. If you have a question, I might answer it, and I might not, because there are clearly moral issues here. I'm not talking about that at all. But as an elder law attorney, I'm going to support my clients and what they want. So, some attorneys are developing a uniform healthcare power of attorney that addresses VSED. And there are some best practices that are going on. For instance, remember, medical aid in dying, no good for somebody who's failed the clock test, right? Can't be done. But if somebody has some memory issues and they know they don't want to end up like their mom or their dad, VSED is a possibility. And so a couple of the protocols are having the person video themselves to explain why they're doing it. So a video to themselves. If they forget, right? If they are eating and drinking and they forget why, you can show them the video of themselves telling them, "Now this is your decision. You can change your mind at any time, but this is you on video." And then a video to the family explaining why they're doing it. I had my first client, and she was into her 90s, and her daughter was the one that actually identified me through, I think my name is written on every bathroom wall of social work offices from here to wherever, and they felt like I would be supportive, and I was, and her team of care folks at Duke, which I don't like to say out loud without an expletive in front of it, but her team at Duke were very good. And her daughter was a little scared because here she is in the Bible Belt, and she knows that they've even got neighbors that are a little concerned about this. Maybe the daughter's letting her kill herself, and suicide is wrong, and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And she was terrified of that. And I said, I'm willing to go in and be your mom's attorney and see if this is what she wants. Well, again, she was as sharp as I am. She's in her 90s. She knew exactly what she wanted. And there wasn't some delusional reason that she wanted to die. She just was tired of not being able to do anything except get out of bed. And she said, "There ain't nothing on TV." She didn't use the word ain't. She's a very educated person. But she knew that she wasn't having a quality of life. And this is what she wanted to do, and her daughter supported her in that. Well, we probably all know that you can't get hospice in for her, right? Until She has a diagnosis of 6 months or less. Can you live for 6 months or less without eating and drinking? No. So on day 3, hospice came in. Doctor wrote the order for hospice. It was her wishes. She had a very nice house and a very nice sort of ensuite in her daughter's house, but her daughter, and she had helped her, the father, and the husband, during his transition at home, and she didn't want that for her daughter, and so she wanted to go to hospice house, and so we set all of that up before time. Day 3, they put the order in. She had a bed, and she passed at hospice. 1 day off from what I told her, but she passed peacefully, and they kept her comfortable, and I feel really good that my client was able to be an advocate for her. My husband sent me an article just recently, and some back and forth about an article, I think, about all the implications for this, and some people are saying, VSED is all about doctors trying to kill people off so they don't have to pay for old people and all this, and it's all kind of back and forth. And again, we could talk for 2 weeks, but we're not going to, because I just wanted to introduce this idea and sort of tell you that. And I've done what I wanted to do and reserve time for questions. One of the questions I just remembered that I didn't address is, what if you do? Oh, and Sue has got the microphone, so really wait to ask your question because they're recording this. What do you do if all your healthcare agents go off, and you don't have anybody named? Again, it's a facts and circumstances test. You get most of your health care here. I always want people to have somebody who knows them and loves them to be their agent, but there are, used to be called, the old name is geriatric care managers. Now they're called aging life care professionals or associates. Some of them will agree to be a healthcare agent, and sometimes people need that case management. I personally, even though you're here at Springmore and you may absolutely love those people and think they're always going to take care of you, they have a vested interest in you staying and paying money, and they employ the healthcare people. I always like to have a check. So I always like to have somebody outside of Springmore, and they probably won't even serve in that role. But I like for people to have a check on that, because ultimately, Springmore is the one that gets to decide if you move up to a higher level of care. Well, you may disagree with that, and you may want somebody kind of an advocate for you. So having somebody independent of Springmore, I think, is important. Is it terribly imperative? Well, do you have a spouse? Do you have children? Do you have others on that list, right, who can make decisions? So I can't say it's terribly important. It really does depend on your facts and circumstances. I will say one more thing is I have been successful. You can go on, Sue. Somebody's got their hand. I have been successful in finding somebody in somebody's community, especially financial areas. I mean, in churches or other faith communities, often you have a CPA or somebody there who's quite a nerd and is really good with money, but they're not going to go out and talk to people. So they often like to serve as a financial power of attorney for somebody because that's a way for them to serve. It uses their skills. They're going to be a good fiduciary for my clients, and it's been a good relationship builder. Okay?
Since we were talking about the eating and drinking, I had heard that if somehow you got hooked up to eating and drinking and the lines were already in, and then perhaps you were not able to express, your desires, that you wanted them removed, that it was very difficult. Once started.
Right. It depends on, did you have a good living will that somebody good drafted for you? So if you have a living will and the doctor has said that this is artificial life support, if it was removed, you're going to die, and your living will addresses it, I'll go to court every day to say that you can do that. So a living will is important. Many, many people don't have a living will, right? And then it falls back to the Terry Schiavo case. Well, if everybody in your community says absolutely they don't want this, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But what are doctors worried about? Me, attorneys, liability, right? it's very difficult to have that done. I had a client who had a major stroke, and she had both water and food, but she could do up and down. I knew how to ask those questions. She was smart as a she was in a living will situation, and she got to make the decision. I brought palliative care in, and I was talking to the palliative care doctor, and he told me a situation that kind of made my spine shiver. He said, there are people who work here who'll come in the middle of the night and give somebody a bolus of stuff because they believe morally it's wrong if they stop eating or drinking. And I'm like, oh, I think that's wrong. But again, that stuff gets played out.
And then I was comforted to know that sometimes at end of life, you do not have the desire to eat or drink. So if you shut off,
So let me address that.
You're not starving.
Yeah, let me address that. How many people kind of regularly or have fasted? Yeah. I don't know if fasting, you have the same fasting. I have this, I try to fast for 3 days, and day one's tough. Day two is better. Day three, I'm golden. And I worked for hospice in central Kentucky, and it was my experience that feeling of hunger goes away pretty quickly. And in fact, the people who are lying there and the people who are anxious about it and cramming food down their mouth and water, it's not making anybody feel better because your body, your guts are like, thank goodness, I'm fine. Nothing's bothering me here. And then if you have hospice in for any sort of anxiety or restlessness or anything like that, but generally it's a very, very calm process. Yep.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. My first question is, if you're the healthcare power of attorney agent, whatever it's called, and you're within phone contact, but you're out of town and it's going to take you hours to get back, can you consult with the medical staff and say, no, that's not what mom or dad wanted, you know?
Sure. If you're up there on the list and your name is there, I like to put, especially for younger people, I put cell phones on there and emails. How many young people really answer their phone? None. So I put emails right on there. And my understanding is medical people are getting better about communicating in that way. They, by law, have to reach out to an agent if they have that. So healthcare powers of attorney ought to be uploaded into my chart so that they're easily accessible. And as long as the people, the doctors, the professional people believe that you are the person listed there, you should be able to make those decisions as if you were standing there.
Thank you. My other question is, I got a little confused. So if somebody has healthcare power of attorney and they've done a most form, are they also separately supposed to do a living will and a 5 wishes or not? I'm very confused.
Okay, so that's kind of a hot button with me. I hate mosts. I just hate them. Again, they're made by the legislature, and mosts only come from a doctor. I believe that the DNR, which is bright yellow, the most is bright pink. I believe that the bright yellow one makes a whole lot more sense, and only a doctor can sign a DNR to say, if you're not breathing and your heart's not beating, hands off. Now, a most has a DNR component, but it also has some other things. And I'm an attorney, and I know I overthink things, but I find it to be confusing. And if I was EMS, I have seen some most forms that I totally didn't like. So a most is only as good as what it says, and if it's confusing to EMS, they're going to do CPR. So you really have to look at those most forms. Neither of those documents come from an attorney. How many of my clients hear about those forms when they come see me? All of them. Because it's important. And your doctor can bill Medicare for that conversation. So I like DNRs. I once got an email from somebody that said, Elisa, I'm sleeping better at night because of you. And of course I had to write back and say, why in the, what is this about? What did I do? And they said, my doctor agreed to give me a DNR, and I've got it on my refrigerator, so nobody's going to bring me half back. And so what I tell my clients is, I want a DNR. Would my doctor give me one today? No, my doctor wouldn't, because I know I'm old, but I'm not that old, and my health is pretty good. So the doctor would say, hell no, Elise, I'm not giving you a DNR. But I want to live long enough to get one, so that if I die, and I've put my order in, and I believe in this, I'm not just joking here. We have cousins on our side of the family, they die before they hit the ground. That's my order. So hands off. If I have a DNR, a doctor signed it, hands off, leave me alone.
Also, two things. In the beginning of your talk, you mentioned having a whole lot of agents, people who knew you
As
well
many
and
as
so
you're
on.
comfortable
Okay.
with. Mhm.
So would you please define the difference between having a healthcare power of attorney and an agent? What's the relationship between them?
Good
and-
question. And I had that in my notes, I just didn't say it out loud. Power of attorney is an old term we're trying to get away from, because people sometimes think that a power of attorney is your attorney. It's not. It's a stupid legal term made by men for men, because that's where all the laws came from. Sorry, men, but that's the truth. So we're trying to change power of attorney to agent. So if you name your agents in a healthcare power of attorney, those are your agents. If you name agents in a financial power of attorney, those are your financial agents. Does that help clear it up?
Okay, yeah. And then I have a comment and a warning, I guess, about VSED. A friend of mine's husband died by VSED 4 years ago. He had 3 health conditions. He wasn't dying, but he decided that his quality of life was not worth living. He did exactly what you described. He stopped eating and drinking, and within 3 or 4 days, hospice came in to support the rest of the process. So anyway, one other, I'm not really sure how to say this. I know of a situation where a woman who had been in a really bad automobile accident, she was old, and it became clear that she was not going to recover, and she decided on VSED. And there were 2 healthcare people that she was interacting with, and one of them said to her when she expressed a desire not to eat or drink anymore, he said, I am not going to be party to your assisted suicide. Mm-hmm. The other healthcare person that she was dealing with was supportive. Mm-hmm. So your one of your slides or one of your comments about it's an assault legally?
Battery, usually.
Battery, okay. Mm-hmm. If somebody it wants to force you to eat or drink and you don't want to, though, so possibly in addition, if this is something you were going to choose, possibly you need to have some kind of a copy of a legal document or the law on that to back you up if someone tries to make you eat or drink. Mm-hmm.
So best practices are to have a team of professionals already in place. One of the other things that I kind of snicker at in my healthcare power of attorney, because a lot of people don't know this, I have a paragraph that says, agent, you can fire your doctor. Isn't that nice and freeing? You have the right to fire a doctor. And so doctors aren't any different than many of us. They come with their own biases and their own beliefs, and there are doctors who believe that it's morally wrong to commit suicide and that VSED is suicide. That's fine. They don't have to serve you if you don't want. Fire them. She had a question.
I have a question about the do not resuscitate.
DNR.
Because of another discussion my husband and I were having, I decided I wanted a DNR. And someone I was talking with about this, who was peripherally in the healthcare field, said, I think you should rethink that. Well, I'm 84 years old. I figure I'll be beat to death by the time they try to get me back to life.
Well, all your ribs will be broken.
That's what I mean. And there you can have a lot of internal damage. So it seems to me like from a 40, 50, maybe 70, but when you're 80, almost 85, there are a lot of negatives.
Sure. And again, it's such a personal decision. And I also think One of the things that always comes out in my practice, which, you can imagine I love, is talking about, well, is there anything beyond this? What if I do die? Because those things go together. I find that the people in my office that don't want a living will, and they're holding on to the table about dying, and they're not going to give up any control on anything, they have some issues. I'm not going to solve them. But the people who want everything done at all costs, it's usually an indication that they need to talk with somebody else because they're really afraid. Which is okay.
So,
Oh, Sue.
I have
Sue
a
has
question. I have a question in just in seeing sometimes with families who you have a son or daughter who's the agent and they're a healthcare power of attorney and they speak for mom or dad. What is the healthcare power of attorney isn't actually valid until that person is not deemed competent
by a doctor.
by a doctor. So what does that look like for the health, so people know that they have agency until that happens?
Right. As long as they're 18 or more and they're competent, a doctor should not talk to anybody else. Now, doctors love for people to come in because how many of you remember your medicines, right? So it's always good to have an advocate there, but you should always be able to make your own decisions. Here's the other thing I love to see this play out in my office when it's usually a spouse who says, oh, goody, I get to make all the decisions because he's never listened to my opinion. Right? Well, under the law, that ain't the way it's supposed to work. If an agent is making decisions for you, they should be making the decisions you would make. And so one of the things that I challenge people on, and I have this all the time coming in with kids, oh, I'm mama's agent, I can do what I want. I'm like, no, you can't. You are supposed to do the things that your mama wanted you to do. And if you don't think that's a moral issue, it's a legal issue, and I would support your sibling in going to court and getting you thrown off because that's the wrong standard. Legally. They don't know that until they're told, but legally it is. And so sometimes people hear this word durable. Durable just means that what you've signed is going to be valid after you've lost your capacity. I've been incapacitated a lot of times. I have to have a lot of colonoscopies. I don't have good guts. Not from Philip's side of the family, the other one. So I have to have people sign for me and go with me to my colonoscopy. So periodically I'm incapacitated legally. But on a healthcare power of attorney, they're all durable, meaning that they only jump into being when a doctor has decided that they need to talk to somebody else to make the decisions because their patient is not capable of making that. And remember, that can change. I have clients on good days, and I have clients that have not so good days, right?
So if you have accepted the responsibility of being someone's healthcare power of attorney, and you're having another conversation with them and saying, well, what would you like for me to do if you become mentally incapacitated? And that person says, I want you to kill me.
Which is against the law.
Well, I didn't say that. I said, I really don't want to go to jail, so, nor be the one that does it. Is there something she needs to put in her?
Again, I
paperwork?
think it's a conversation. My husband's fond of telling people that we have the pillow clause in our document. And people look at him funny, and he says, I give her the permission to put the pillow over my head if I ever become like my mom. His mom had dementia. So I think it's a conversation to help people realize that they're more in charge of what they want than they're not. And the other thing that we always have to keep in mind, even people who start the VSED process and they say, oh, when this happens, I'm going to do VSED. And then this happens, they're like, yeah, no. Oh, but when I'm soiling myself and I have to have somebody wipe me, that's when I'm going to. And then that happens, and they're like, no, not now. So we as humans evolve, and a decision we make at one point in our life doesn't necessarily mean when we're actually facing death that that's what we want. So I would say frequent conversations, putting something in writing at one point in time doesn't necessarily guarantee that somebody's going to uphold that. And if I've got a piece of paper and I've got a doctor that says this is what, let's just say my mama wanted, you think the doctor, or I say, yeah, my mama wanted it. I've got a piece of paper that says my mama wanted it, but I don't want it. You think that doctor's going to be an advocate for my mama? Hell no. She's afraid of me. I'm an attorney. They're going to listen to me, right? So you need an advocate for yourself. And there are many, many, many of us out there who are trying to help people who prioritize quality of life and the autonomy to hasten their death, and they will support people in that position. There are people that don't.
I had changed my mind and decided I wanted a DNR, so I went to the lawyer who had done my healthcare power of attorney several months back. And we spent the first 10 minutes with him arguing I did not want this.
And what kind of medical degree did he have?
I don't know, but I said, I'm 86 years old. This is what I mean, he finally agreed. But I thought,
It's a medical decision. It is not
well,
a
yeah,
legal
but,
decision.
oh, he went on and on about he had a friend that this and that and that, and if they wouldn't have that in place, they'd still be alive. He finally did it, but
He didn't do it.
10 minutes of arguing.
He didn't give you a DNR, I promise you. You did not get a DNR from your doctor. From your lawyer. A DNR only comes from a doctor. A living will, which I talked about, comes from an attorney. And the living will is not the same as a DNR. A DNR is, right now, if I had a DNR, it's not posted. If I collapse and EMS comes in, they're going to bring my heart back. That's a DNR. Do not resuscitate.
Well, I do have one on my most form that my
It's
doctor
pink.
had signed.
Yeah, and I want you to read it and see if it's clear.
I'm sorry?
I want you to read it and see if it's clear. And a most form can contain DNR provisions, but you really have to read it and make sure within that form it's not contradicted.
Oh.
So a DNR is bright yellow, and it just has one issue. If my heart is not beating, no, if you have a pacemaker, you also have to put that in there. But if my heart's not beating and I'm not breathing, hands off EMS. Wake County has the highest resuscitation rate. A living will is different, and that's what an attorney gives you. And remember, I told you, the cards are stacked against you in a living will situation. A doctor's not going to call it. Your family has to call it, or you do. Just isn't going to happen. Unless the writing's completely on the wall, right? And what that usually means, and I hate to be so cynical, but I'm old and I am. What that usually means is the insurance company has said, they're not getting better. We're not going to pay for this.
I'd like to give kudos to doctors at Rex Hospital. When I was admitted under emergency basis and rushed right to surgery because they wanted to remove infection in my chest. And when they got in there looking, they saw that my throat was closing very rapidly. So they immediately brought me back to consciousness and got my husband in the room and said, we need to intubate. But we know your wife has a DNR. And so I was like, well, no, then you can't intubate. And then they explained, this is not a life-extending DNR. We're not going to plug you in so we can breathe for you forever.
Exactly.
We're just saying you need a tube until your throat opens up again and you can breathe.
Nice.
So that, they handled it beautifully, but that gave me a new view of what a DNR
Right.
can be.
And that
It's
is the
always-
law.
Yeah.
So if I have a DNR and I have to go in for surgery, they're going to tell me, that DNR doesn't apply. If you code on the table, we're bringing you back because we don't want to be sued, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. And that's not a life prolonging, right? For treatment purposes. A ventilator, a lot of people think, oh, a ventilator is only used for life prolonging. No. They also think oxygen. Oxygen is only used for life prolonging. No. Sometimes my clients in hospice care get oxygen because it makes them breathe easier, and we're all about comfort and pain relief. All right, I see my time here is ending. I'm fine to stay. I'm not doing anything, but I'll let Sue make the call about how much longer. Do we want to take a couple more questions?
Is anybody else? Are you okay with a couple more questions?
You're paying me, right, Sue?
Right.
A lot of us are from out of state, and what of these documents that we have discussed should
Sure.
be reviewed by a local
Yeah.
lawyer? Or
So what attorneys have to tell you, unless they're licensed in other states, I'm not licensed in that state, so if you move, let an attorney look at your documents. A lot of documents are going to be, it's called full faith and credit, are going to be given full faith and credit in North Carolina, especially if they were done by an attorney in another state. I have seen some really bad do-it-yourself documents. Yeah. Those are not good. Get another attorney to do that. But for the most part, especially wills, if I have to probate an out-of-state will, I just have to do an affidavit and print out what the law was at the time for that will. No big deal for me to do. So you do not always have to have new documents, but you should let a reputable attorney look over your documents in a new state.
On the screen, it says you're moving soon to Cary. Are those is that contact information current? And how soon are you going to be moving to Cary?
Yep, I signed a lease Tuesday. I was in the very best office in downtown Cary for 12 years. And they're turning the chicken coop in the house that I was in. I wasn't in the chicken coop. I was in the house part, into food and beverage. And so I'm getting kicked out, or I probably will be. So I found some office space above a pub. 1 mile down the road on Chatham Street, what is it? It is Chatham, thanks, Philip. He has to keep me straight. So I found some office space on Chatham Street to share with another attorney. We're not merging our offices or anything, but I'm going to be moving officially October 1st. And some of you might be getting I'm moving because you might have come to see me at some point, and I want you to come to an open house. I'm pretty sure it's going to be October 19th. Now, I didn't say this, but I'm going to say this. I will pretend that I don't know anybody in this room except Philip. So if any of you know me, fine, but I'm not going to, if you're a client, remember confidentiality. One more.
One more question. There you go.
This may or may not be pertinent to what you've discussed, but in recent months, there have been some laws changed. I guess they possibly are more financial. Do you know of any of them that with the some of the recent laws that have changed?
Federal or state?
Federal.
So all the areas that I deal with are people. So family law, estate, probate, all of that falls under the jurisdiction of the state. So rarely do I have to deal with federal laws except for benefits. And again, federal benefits like Medicaid and Medicare come down to the states for them to administer. So yeah, there's been lots of changes with funding and all kinds of things for mostly, in my world, Medicaid, Medicare benefits things. But I don't know of any federal laws that are affecting my people.
This may be more determined with trust. which would be from the financial point of view.
Yeah, that's not federal. That's definitely state. North
Okay.
Carolina is part of the Uniform Trust Act now. So one of the nice things about that is our laws that have to do with trusts and trust management. The states who've opted in for the uniform trust laws, and of course every state, even though it's called uniform, has their own little thing, but I promise you that falls under the jurisdiction of the state. Trusts do. Management, having trusts outside the state, it says it right there on my website. I don't do high net worth planning for folks. So right now, a couple has to have 24 million. Yeah. Before there's estate taxes, I don't do planning for that. Now, those laws are going to change at the end of the year because they're sunsetting about whether there'll be in a federal estate tax. North Carolina has none, and I don't see us getting any. But those laws will change. Now, does anybody want to guess on what they're going to be? I don't know. I don't think anybody else knows either. So there are taxation laws, obviously, that have to do with federal.
If we could give her a hand, thank you so much. And next week, same time, same place, 2:00, we'll have Charlotte Jenkins, who was our previous clinic director. She's going to be coming back and talking about what does palliative care and hospice care look like specifically at Springmore. And you can bring questions about DNR and most forms to Charlotte, too. She'd be a great resource for those questions. If you want to send those to me ahead of time or any questions about palliative care and hospice at Springmore, feel free to email them to me and I'll send them to Charlotte so she can plan ahead. Thanks so much.